couldn't be real. The same road, the same flashing lights, yet he'd never turned around. In over 20 years behind the wheel, he'd seen his share of long nights and strange encounters. But nothing like this. Through the windshield, the fog pressed in, thick and unbroken. Somewhere inside it, faint red and blue lights pulsed, never closer, never farther. Then, a shape emerged. A man in uniform, stepping into the beam of the headlights, face pale and unreadable. He didn't ask for ID, didn't check the truck, just leaned close to the window and spoke 6 words. "Don't stop until you're through the fog." The glass between them seemed thinner than it should have been. And before Tom could respond, the lights vanished. The road ahead stretched on, empty. And that's when he realized he was back where he started. If you've ever been alone at night and felt something watching you, subscribe now, because some roads don't forgive mistakes. Hours earlier, the night had been ordinary. The kind of run Tom Carver could make half asleep if he had to. 45 years old, 20 of them on the road. He'd seen every mile marker, every diner, every lonely stretch of asphalt in this part of the state. It was a route he could trace in his head without the help of a GPS. But on this night, the GPS spoke anyway. A calm, mechanical voice. "Checkpoint ahead, mile 47. Tom frowned. There wasn't a checkpoint at mile 47. There had never been one. He'd been up and down this road for years. No police presence, no rest stop, nothing but pine trees and faded guardrails. The weather was clear, the sky moonless. Out here, the dark didn't just surround you, it settled on you. The diesel engine rumbled beneath his seat, the steady hum of tires on asphalt filling the cab, familiar sounds, comforting sounds. Then the comfort was gone. Without warning, the horizon lit up, 3 sets of flashing lights spilling red and blue across the blacktop. They appeared all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Tom eased off the gas, scanning for hazard signs, but there was nothing. No reflective cones, no flares, just the sudden glare of floodlights and 3 police cruisers parked crosswise in the road. At the center of it, a lone officer stood. He didn't wave, didn't signal, just waited. His hat cast a shadow over his face, and the fog, where had it come from, wrapped around his legs. Tom rolled to a stop. The man stepped forward, boots crunching softly against the pavement, and leaned toward the open driver's side window. His voice was even, almost flat. "Don't stop until you're through the fog. No matter what happens. No introduction. No explanation. Just those words hanging in the cold air between them." Tom nodded without thinking, pressing his foot back to the pedal. The cruisers, the lights, the officer, they slipped into the rear view as the truck rolled forward. But when Tom checked again, seconds later, the road behind him was empty. No lights, no cars, nothing but darkness stretching forever. He hadn't been back on the open stretch for more than a few minutes when the change began. At first, it was just a haze, soft, harmless, hanging low across the asphalt. But the further he drove, the thicker it became. It didn't drift, it didn't move with the wind. It built itself, swallowing the road in slow, deliberate layers. Tom flicked on the fog lights, leaning forward over the wheel. Beyond the glass, the white wall pressed closer, clinging to the truck like wet breath. The familiar rumble of the diesel echoed strangely now, muffled, as though the sound couldn't travel beyond the hood. On the dash, his GPS shivered. The map that had been clear and precise moments earlier now stuttered in frozen frames, as if the road beneath him didn't exist. The icon of his truck blinked in place. No matter how far he pressed the pedal, the screen insisted he hadn't moved. The glowing text in the corner read only, "Mile 47." It didn't change, it didn't update. A burst of static cracked through the CB radio, sharp enough to make him flinch. He reached for the dial, but froze. Beneath the static was something else, faint, tangled in the noise. Words. A voice, his voice. "Keep driving, don't look back." The air inside the cab turned heavy. He swallowed hard, telling himself it was just a glitch, maybe a rebroadcast, maybe nothing at all. He forced a laugh under his breath, eyes straining to catch the road lines through the fog, and then the headlights caught a shape, a sign. Green, reflective. Mile 47 checkpoint, 1 mile ahead. The words sank in. That wasn't possible. He'd already passed it. He gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles pale against the leather, keeping the truck steady down the center lane. And then there it was, the exact same checkpoint, the same cruisers, the same floodlights pouring into the fog, And at the center, the same officer, standing in the exact same spot, not a hair, not a shadow out of place. Tom slowed, heart thudding. The officer stepped forward, leaning in once more. His voice was the same flat tone, each syllable deliberate. Don't stop until you're through the fog. No other words, no motion to wave him on. Just that single warning, repeated exactly. If you saw the same place twice in one night, would you keep driving? Subscribe now, and if you think you wouldn't, tell me why in the comments. He told himself it was just fatigue, too many miles without a break. The mind could play tricks in the dark, and truckers learned to live with the occasional shadow or phantom sound. That's all it was. That's what he told himself. But then, the sound came. It started faint. So faint it might have been the wind dragging along the trailer. But it wasn't the wind. It was steady, deliberate. A slow, dragging scrape against the metal walls of the container behind him. Not from outside, from inside. The kind of sound that made you think something wanted out. He glanced at the mirrors. The trailer doors were locked, sealed from the pickup yard. No reason for anyone or anything to be in there. His grip on the wheel tightened. The scratching grew louder, following the rhythm of the truck's movement, as if whatever was making it was pacing with his speed. He tried the CB again, nothing but the low hiss of dead air. Then, movement caught his eye. In the passenger side mirror, something was keeping pace with the truck. A shape. Tall, narrow, just outside the reach of the headlight beam. Every few seconds, it would vanish into the fog, only to reappear again, exactly where it had been. He craned his neck to see the shoulder of the road, but it was empty. Nothing there but a wall of white. He turned back and froze. The officer from the checkpoint was sitting in the passenger seat. No sound of the door opening, no shift in the suspension, just there. Head turned forward, hands resting on his knees back, the brim of his hat hiding most of his face. The air in the cab felt heavier now, thick enough to breathe in like smoke. Tom's foot slammed the brake. The rig shuddered, tires squealing against wet pavement. The seat beside him was empty again. No trace of anyone ever being there. Not even the smell of rain that had clung to the officer's coat earlier. The dashboard lights flickered once, twice, and when they steadied, the beam of his headlights was already cutting through the fog. Ahead of him, the cruisers, the floodlights, the same lineup of vehicles blocking the road, the same checkpoint, for the third time that night. And there, in the center of the lane, the officer stepped forward. His voice was exactly the same as before, every word measured, unbroken. Don't stop until you're through the fog. This time, when the officer stepped forward, the fog didn't hide him, not completely. The brim of his hat tilted back just enough for the light to touch his face. And that's when Tom realized what had been wrong from the start. The skin was smooth, unnaturally so. Not the kind of smoothness that came from youth, but from the absence of life. No pores, no lines, no blemish or shadow to give it depth. Just an even, wax-like surface, pale under the floodlights. And the eyes, they didn't move. They didn't shift or blink. They stayed fixed, wide and glassy, as though they had been set in place and left there. The officer leaned toward the open window. When he spoke, the words came slower than before, drawn out like each one was being pushed through thick water. Don't stop until you're through. The weight in those words sank into Tom's chest. Something about the way the air carried them felt wrong. He didn't wait for anything else. His foot slammed against the accelerator, the rig lurching forward, tires screaming under the sudden strain. But the road didn't behave like it should have. The lines that marked the lanes began to blur, fading into the wet blacktop until there was nothing but a straight, empty ribbon vanishing into the fog. The horizon itself dissolved, swallowed whole. No matter how far he pushed the truck, it never seemed to close the distance. The speedometer climbed, but the world ahead stayed fixed, a painted backdrop refusing to move. Then the CB came alive. It wasn't static this time. It was a voice, high, fragile, a child's voice. Turn back, you're not supposed to leave. The sound clawed at him, not because of the words, but because he recognized the tone. The voice was speaking as if it knew him, as if it was speaking only to him. He reached for the CB mic, ready to demand answers, but froze when a new sound joined in. Footsteps, heavy, pacing. From above the cab roof, each one landing with the slow, deliberate weight of someone who knew he could hear them. Gravel in the treads of their boots crunching faintly against the metal. The steps moved from front to back, then stopped directly over his head. Tom's eyes flicked to the GPS. The map was gone. All that remained was a black screen with a single blinking red dot in the center. Beneath it, in plain white letters, was one label, Mile 47. No road. No route. Just that point, pulsing steadily like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. It was the movement that made him look. At first he thought it was the fog shifting in the beams of his headlights, but then the shapes began to separate. Edges forming where there shouldn't have been any. Arms, shoulders, heads. They were people, dozens of them, walking alongside the truck in perfect unison. Their strides matched his speed exactly, never faster, never slower. Each step landed in the same rhythm, like they were connected by something unseen. The fog clung to them like a second skin, but it wasn't enough to hide the details. A few wore trucker jackets, some had caps pulled low, a handful clutched metal key rings or weathered logbooks, their knuckles pale from the grip. Tom knew those logbooks, spiral-bound, coffee-stained, the kind every long-haul driver kept. Their faces, though, those were gone. Not missing in the way a wound takes something away, missing in the way the fog seemed to choose not to let him see them. A shifting blur where the features should have been, but even without faces, he could feel their eyes, all of them, fixed on him, watching every movement. The line stretched far into the mist, and then his headlights caught something else. Up ahead, the checkpoint. Again. But this time, there were no cruisers, no floodlights, just the officers. Dozens of them, standing in a straight line across the width of the road. Their posture rigid, hands at their sides, not one of them moving an inch. It was as if they'd been placed there and told to wait for him. The road narrowed under the weight of the scene ahead. Tom's instincts screamed at him not to pass between them. Every hair on his arm stood up as the distance closed. 20 yards, 15, 10. At the last moment, he wrenched the wheel to the right, the trailer groaning in protest. The tires bit into gravel, then dirt, as the rig lurched onto an unmarked side path. No signs, no lights, just a rough track cutting through the trees. The mirrors shook with the rattle of the uneven ground, but when he glanced into them, the officers were still there. Not on the road anymore, but in the fog behind him, their shapes holding perfectly still, heads all turned to follow his path. The dirt road wound deeper into the dark, and still, he could feel their gaze. The dirt road should have felt like escape. The trees closed in tight on either side, the branches arching over him like a tunnel. For a moment, he thought the change in terrain might slow whatever this was. But then, the fog followed. It didn't drift, it advanced. From the rear view, he watched it pour over the trees and the road like a living tide, swallowing the trunks, the bark, the space between them. The farther he pushed into the forest, the more the world behind him disappeared. Even the sky began to vanish. The faint outline of the moon dimmed, its light muted until it was nothing but a pale smear in the mist. Soon there was no moonlight at all, just the harsh glare of his headlights punching holes in the dark. Then came the sound. At first he thought it was the rattle of loose cargo, but it grew louder, sharper, until it resolved into something far more deliberate. Footsteps, dozens of them, heavy, pounding the dirt in a steady rhythm that matched his speed exactly. The noise circled the truck, not just behind him, but on both sides, moving in parallel with the trailer. It was too organized to be random, too precise. Tom glanced at the driver's side mirror. Shapes, officers, more than a dozen of them sprinting through the trees. Their forms blurred by the speed, their legs moving in an unnatural, jerking rhythm that didn't match the ground beneath them. Their heads stayed perfectly level, locked on him, no matter how uneven the terrain became. He checked the passenger side mirror, and there they were again. Another line of them, identical in every detail, running alongside, their gazes never breaking. The CB crackled, not with static this time, but with a voice so deep it seemed to rattle the dashboard. Distorted, drawn out, each word scraping its way into the cab. "You're almost through." The message didn't sound like encouragement. It sounded like a warning, or worse, a promise. And then as the road curved, he saw it. A break in the fog. Far ahead, a patch of clear sky opened like a wound in the night, a strip of darkness where the stars were visible again. It was the only thing ahead that wasn't shrouded, the only thing that looked real. His chest tightened. If that was the exit, he had to reach it. But the footsteps weren't slowing, and neither was the fog. The break in the fog widened, spilling open in front of him until the night was suddenly clean. The trees stood still, no longer shifting in the mist. The hum of the engine sounded normal again, unwarped by the strange, muffled air. He was back on asphalt. A straight stretch of highway lay ahead, lined by familiar guardrails. No cruisers, no figures pacing the road, not even the faint glow of police lights on the horizon. Just empty blacktop stretching into the dark. For the first time in hours, Tom let himself breathe. His grip on the wheel loosened. A nervous laugh broke from his chest, half relief, half disbelief. He glanced up through the windshield at the stars above, as sharp and bright as they should be. But then, the reflection of his dash lights caught something in the corner of his eye. A green highway sign approaching fast. He read the words before his mind could tell him not to. Mile 47 checkpoint, 1 mile ahead. The laugh died in his throat. His hands began to tremble against the wheel. The leather felt slick now, though he couldn't tell if it was from sweat or the damp air creeping back into the cab. He glanced at his watch, and his stomach dropped. The time was exactly the same as it had been when he first rolled up to the checkpoint. Not a minute had passed, not a second. The hum of the engine was suddenly too loud, the stillness of the road ahead too perfect. And on the horizon, just past the reach of his headlights, the fog was returning, low and steady, crawling over the blacktop like it had been waiting for him to come back. If you were in his seat, would you turn back or keep driving? Subscribe if you'd never risk it. And if you would, I want you in the comments explaining why. The fog swelled, its edges curling upward like smoke. This time it didn't wait for him to approach. It was moving toward him. The last piece of evidence came from a dash cam pulled from Tom's truck weeks later. The footage is grainy, edges warped by static, but the image is clear enough to make out the scene. The truck rolls forward into the thick wall of fog, and the checkpoint comes into view. There's only one officer this time. He steps out from the mist as if he's been standing there all night, waiting. The cruiser lights flicker weakly behind him, their glow dying in the fog. The truck slows. The officer walks to the driver's side, leans in close, so close the brim of his hat brushes the glass. His lips move, but there's no sound, no audio at all, only the image of Tom's face as the words sink in. The change is instant. The muscles in his jaw lock, his eyes widen, and the color drains from his skin. His hands slip from the wheel, and then the video cuts to black before the words are revealed. The next frame is still, a faded missing persons poster. It's Tom. His name printed in bold above the words, "Last seen, mile 47." The date at the bottom reads 2 years before the dashcam footage was recorded. If you made it here, you've already driven further than Tom did. Subscribe before your next trip because some roads won't let you come back.